All right, what's up, guys? So this is episode one of Fundamental PT's YouTube channel. Today is going to be all about upper cervical segments, and we're really just going to talk about the bony anatomy, the joint surfaces, that kind of stuff. And that's so that when we get to the other stuff, it kind of makes sense. You already have that base layer of knowledge. We'll zoom in here to the back of Adam's skull here. Take that little chunk off. So there you can see the C1 vertebrae. It's also known as the atlas, and that's because it holds our head up holds our head up. It holds up the world. Now, if you look at the joint surfaces there, it's referred to as a saddle joint, and simply because of the shape of it. Makes sense, right? So it gives us a lot of freedom of movement, and you look at that joint surface and we'll see how the skull kind of fits right down in that, and it gives us so much movement. I mean, we get 50% of the movement that we have, flexion extension, comes from that one segment. So that means it's pretty important, right? And that includes thoracic segments. So we're not just talking about cervical movement. When we move our head up or down like that, textbook, perfect world, we should get movement down to mid-thoracic, like T6. That doesn't always happen, but then problems arise, right? So the key point here is that 0-1, we refer to our head as 0. That 0-1 joint gives us so much mobility, and when it's stiff for whatever reason, it can really cause problems right there. It can cause headaches, or it can cause problems down the chain. Okay, so moving on. Well, let me back up for a second. So C1 has this little articular surface on the anterior arch there, and that's for C2. So that's where we're going next. So we're going to take a look at the C2 vertebrae, also known as the axis. Now, ever since PT school, I always thought C2 looked like the alien fighter ship from the movie Independence Day, and I could never unsee it. So hopefully somebody knows what I'm talking about there. C2 is really interesting. So it's got this, what's called the odontoid process, or the dens. It kind of pops up like that right there. And that's where what I backed up for a second to look at on C1 again is where those 2 points articulate. So the dens comes up and C1 sits around it like that. And that's so that it can spin. So equally as important of a segment. So we're talking about 0-1 giving us half of this flexion extension. We get about 50% of all of our rotation. And again, that includes down into the thoracic segments. We get 50% of that rotation from the C1-2 joint. So if there's restrictions, and I'm a pretty good example of this because I can't turn my head very far to the right, and it doesn't feel good. The pain is lower though. So the key point there is the same as what we were talking about for 0-1, and that's if you have a restriction at one of these 2 segments in the upper cervical, oftentimes it shows up as pain down lower. And I'll rein myself in because I could go down a serious rabbit hole there, but those lower cervical segments often pay the price of stiffness of the upper cervical segments. Now, we're going to spin around to the TMJ here real quick, just because it kind of fits in with the upper cervical segments. And the way it fits in is that in a situation where we're actually unstable, so we're not talking about stiffness anymore, unstable, and there's a lot of different reasons that people can be unstable in the upper cervical segments. Oftentimes the response to that is gritting, grinding teeth, and it may be overnight, so you don't even know you're doing it. That's your body looking for stability from somewhere close by. Now, it doesn't help. We get trigger points in muscles here that can cause headaches. I had a patient a long time ago that had this really intense pain in her ear canal. She had been all over, this was up in Clarksville, she had been to all these ear, nose, and throat guys, and nobody could figure out what was wrong. We found this wicked trigger point in her masseter, one of the main muscles that moves that TMJ, and it reproduced her ear pain, and we got it to go away. That was pretty amazing. That was an interesting experience for a new therapist, but that we're going to call it good on episode 1. I want to keep these around 5 minutes. The next one, we're going to talk more about the muscles in this area, so the suboccipitals amongst others, but that'll be kind of the focus. So if you find this helpful, guys, leave me a comment. If you don't find it helpful, leave me a comment. I want to know what people think so I can make this as valuable as possible. Thanks, guys. Stick to the fundamentals.